Thank you. Diane, can you for the record let us know which city officials are in attendance?
State and Service Director Barb Sylvester.
Present.
Chief Deputy Auditor Stephanie Myers.
Present.
Assistant Law Director Edmund Mack.
Present.
Economic Development Director David Maywey.
Present.
Fire Chief Matthew Heck.
Present.
Street Superintendent Tom Burgass.
Here.
Is there anyone from administration I missed? Oh, Lori, you're back there. I did, and I even had you marked. Lori Kadeki from Income Tax and Budget Director.
Present.
Thank you. And let the record show that all members of council, including the council president, are in attendance with the exception of Mr. Jamie Slutz. Before we get started, Mr. Gray, do you have anything you want to share with us this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I wasn't expecting that, but yes, of course I do. I want to give a big shout out to the Massillon Tiger boys football team for a great victory Friday night against Cincinnati Elder. Absolutely destroyed them, and in so doing qualified for the state championship game, which we play at Canton Hall of Fame, Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium on Thursday evening. I hope that everybody that's able to do so from Massillon will come out and support the team, show up, be loud, and again, as I mentioned before, business owners that have marquees and signs, especially along Lincoln Way, get Go Tigers up on those signs. Show the boys we support, and they've represented our city and their team very well this year. So, Go Tigers!
Go Tigers.
Community development,
I have nothing, Mr. Lewis.
economic development,
Nothing this evening.
health and welfare,
Nothing this evening.
parks and rec,
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We have one item. It's to prepare a resolution in support of the Reservoir Park Stream, Pond, and Pump House Restoration Project for the year 23-24 with state capital budget funding. They're going to be applying for a grant for there. I talked to Mr. Slutz and I talked to the president of the board, and they were all in support of this. Probably plan to do it in stages, involve a few members of the community who are involved with wanting to restore the reservoir, their wealth of knowledge, and start with the lake and proceed from there and work on pursuing other grants to fund these projects. Anybody have any questions or discussions? Just an issue to start.
So essentially, all this is us saying that we come into agreement with the beginning stages of
Pursuing money.
pursuing money and pursuing what this project would exactly entail.
Exactly. That's all I have for Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Police and fire,
Nothing for police and fire, Mr. Lewis.
public utilities,
No business this evening, thank you.
rules and courts.
Yes, I do have one piece of old business left over from last week. We discussed ordinance number 124-2023, gave it first reading. This is a ordinance that Councilman Slutz brought forward. Basically, the idea is that he wants to combine the community development position and the economic development position into one position, slightly higher salary than either of the previous two, but less than the other two, or less than the two combined. And the idea with the money being saved, being used for a number of different things, such as perhaps animal control, additional money for the police and fire departments. So those are his ideas on that. Are there any questions, concerns? I do plan to move this forward for next week. Mrs. Creamer.
Yes, since we have two positions now, as stated, a community development director and an economic development director, do we have a job description of the director of development? And does that job description include both descriptions of those current director positions?
That I don't believe we do. We have just for the ordinance, but not actual separate descriptions at this point.
Can we be provided that job description since this individual is going to be doing both positions?
I think we could, we'll relay those questions, that request to Mr. Sluse.
Okay. That's all I have. I'd just like to ensure whoever fills this position understands that they were going to be doing two positions with their current role. And there's no questions regarding whose responsibilities fall under. Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, I have a couple questions or discussion points, I guess, for possibly either Lori or Stephanie. I don't know which one would be in the best position to respond. But just so that we're, full transparency, when we combine these two positions, the Community Development Director as it stands now is funded through CDBG dollars. And the Economic Development Director is funded through general fund. So when we combine these two, there would be a mixing of that. Well, the CDBG funds are on a fiscal year, meaning we're already 6 months into that approved budget, and that approved budget has to be approved by HUD before we can approve it. So I want to make sure, and that's where it comes up to Lori or Stephanie, are we going to find ourselves in a position where we have to go to HUD in order to really make this concrete?
Good evening, Council. Mr. Lewis is correct. The CDBG budget, as it stands today, is funded through HUD. So it is not funded through the general fund. And that is done through the action plan that you approved probably in April or May. The thing that concerns me with the funds is if it's funded from CDBG, those dollars, that particular job has to go anything with CDBG. So you can't, if economic development is outside of the Livermont area, then that would pull from the funds from the general fund, if that makes sense. You would have to go to HUD if you're going to alter the action plan. So if you needed to take money and change it in the action plan, you would need to go to HUD first to get that approved. And you could do that off it's kind of cumbersome, but you can do it. You need to go to HUD to get that approved, and then it would come to council. HUD has to approve it first.
What if we underspent in a line item? Does that necessarily require anything?
If you underspend it in a line item and you want to move it, you have to go to HUD, that's
Well,
it.
what if we just leave it as underspent?
If you underspend, you can just leave and underspend, you're just going to have to report why on your paper. And the only reason I know a little bit more, or not to be dangerous, is I did CDBG for a year. So I know what that whole...
But in theory, I'm just working through this plan. So in theory, half of the community development director's salary is unpaid according to CDBG's fiscal year.
They go July 1st to June. So right now they're in 23, 24. They won't kick into 24 until next July 1st.
So that January will be 50% of the way. We'll be halfway through
Yes,
the budget year
yes.
for HUD. So that means half of the salary that goes to the community development director will be unspent. If we do a blending of these two positions, we won't spend that half in this new role if we're separating out. Is everybody following me now? Because if we take half of the director of development, half their salary is coming from general fund and half their salary is coming from CDBG, we won't outspend the CDBG allocations. And then we can just tell HUD, hey, we had another $35,000 for this specific use, we only need 20, we'd like to move this 15.
I would not speak for HUD. I would call the HUD rep. I believe that you can't just move it like a budget transfer. I do believe there's a process that goes through, but you would have to call your HUD representative. I also need to make you all aware that next year the 5-year plan goes into effect, so I would imagine it's something with his job being split, with that HUD dollars would need to be written into that as well. Just that's a new territory. I'm not saying 100% that would have to be done, but, so.
I just want to make sure that we identify the steps that would have to take place so we don't find ourselves in a situation where we jeopardize the funding. I think it can work, I just think there's some additional steps that need to be taken.
You just have to always keep HUD. You always have to go to HUD first. You always have to, and they'll tell you whether you need to, when you need to amend and what you need to do. But when that action plan is brought to you, initially that is approved by HUD before it comes to council, so.
Would there be additional documentation needed for that particular percentage of CDBG funds for this role? I mean, I know like targeted areas, like that funding can only be used for, targeted areas. So would that position require
Well,
specifics?
my personal opinion, I would say yes, because you're probably going to have to put it on the paper. I haven't been paper in 5 years, so I'm going up. If you're say 50-50, then you would show that 50% of that funding is coming, and of that work is coming from CDBG.
And list out, itemize those
I think to be safe,
and responsibilities.
that would be, it's just, when dealing with, I'm not saying it can't be done, but when dealing with HUD, sometimes it's a little bit sticky. So you just have to make sure we dot our i's and cross all our t's with that. But, I would suggest that someone reach out to the HUD representative to ask some of those questions.
I think some of that will also come from where the job description will be, right? The job description will show 50% economic development, 50% community development, and then listed duties under each. And then we can provide that to HUD to justify why we're charging CDBG funds 50% of the salary of the Director of Development. Just having that documentation in mind. We'll have to move quickly though, well, not us personally, but the administration will have to move quickly as soon as they take office in order to make sure that they're contacting HUD and making that work right away. Other than that, is it moving to a 30S? Is that what it's requesting?
Yes.
Do we have other offices that right now are at a 30S? Is that the Safety Service Director?
No, the Safety Service Director is a 26S. Off the top of my head, the only other 30S would be our city engineer. I don't know exactly what maybe Steve or Tony might be. I need to look at that, but I do know the city engineer is a 30S. And I think the entry level would start around 81,000.
Anybody else have any questions? That's all I have, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, and that's all I have. As I said, I plan to move this forward next week.
All right, streets and highways.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Nothing new. There is one old piece of legislation, ordinance number 110-2023, authorizing mayor, director, and/or director of public safety, city of Massillon, to enter into an agreement with Kettle Creek Capital for traffic signal improvement between 24th Street Northeast, 25th Street Northeast. Last meeting, I made a motion to suspend the rules. It was voted down. Now would be a time for Jill, Councilwoman Jill and Councilwoman Julie to ask any questions they had.
I spoke with the developer this past week and got multiple items clarified. The last time we spoke, there were conversations based on the original project brought forward, that the developer was taking care of the traffic study and the traffic lights. So that's what I was questioning, why now we have legislation in front of us assisting them with the costs. And he did answer all the questions that I had, and I have a better understanding of the project, the scope of the project, and why the request is being made. Thank you.
I guess I was hoping, and I talked to Mr. Lewis about it, and I know he had some conversations. I didn't know if there was any way we could do some type of variance. The control arm for the lights, the understanding was that was like $225,000. And I mean, the majority of lights on Lincoln Way are just held by cables. And if that was a huge amount of the cost, I was just wondering if we could offset their costs by allowing them to use cables there. But Mr. Lewis talked to them. I don't know if you want to explain what they said. I don't want to.
Yeah, well, I need to clarify, that is under finance. What Mr. Snee is talking about is something else.
Oh,
So the piece that we're talking about is 24th Street East.
okay.
He's from the 24th Street West. Hence the
Okay.
confusion. Is that right?
That's the same. It's the same, right? It's the same for both. One piece
Yeah,
is
this
electric.
is between 24th Street Northeast and 25th Street Northeast.
It's the traffic study related to
For the new project, yeah.
And they're, okay. Read that again, I'm sorry. Or just pass it.
So, do we need to table this? Is there more questions going on here, or is everybody satisfied moving forward?
No, I think I was confused. Yeah, I have questions now. Okay. So my understanding, to what Ms. Harwood Smith was talking about, was the $75,000 that was being requested to come out of marketplace TIF to go to the developer to offset the $200,000 and some change expense related to the improvement of mast arms where the Panda Express and the Starbucks are going on the Lincoln Way East. What I don't understand, and where my confusion is, what this piece is doing exactly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Why are we transferring money up to them and then also going into an agreement with Kettle Creek Capital? Unless that is this the agreement that allows us to give the money to them?
Is there somebody from administration who'd like to come up and speak on this?
That makes sense. So this is the agreement, and I have the appropriation.
Right, that's kind of.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. If there's no further questions, and everybody's now on the same page, we'll move forward with it next Monday. Oh,
I don't know. I don't know if Mr. Maley, is there any way that we can not make it mandatory to have the mast arm, and that would save them money?
So that is the piece that you're, okay, so I had conversations with Mr. Mason. The first question I asked is, can we do a variance where it's not requiring them to do the mast arms? That was not an option that we could do. So then I asked, can we amend the ordinance as requiring this so that it essentially eliminated the requirement in this particular situation? After a discussion with the engineering office, it becomes 6 to 1, half dozen to the other situation. If we remove the requirement for the mast arms, they would still have to have new poles erected to secure the light box that would be hanging in the center for a 4-way control. The cost of those poles and to have them installed and the cost of the mast arms, the difference is negligible. And so it wouldn't really matter either way to the developer. Each improvement would cost them about the same. So why would we make the steps to make a change of our ordinance when really it's not benefiting the developer? Was what the engineers responded back to us.
Well, that answers my question then, my concern. I was just trying to think of how we could offset the cost to the developer, you know, but that's a shame. But.
And I apologize for my confusion. I was thinking of the traffic study on the west side that we've been discussing for over a year now.
any further questions? Okay, we'll give this third reading next month. Thank you.
I believe the developer and the team would like to see this move if at all possible so they can get started on the project. All right, finance. Hopefully I'm a little bit straighter on this, right? Why don't we go ahead and jump straight to the budget, since we do have some people here to discuss that. So, Ms. Lori, have you some more?
Okay, I do have answers to your questions about where Parks and Rec Director and where that's wastewater director is at. And thank you to Stephanie, she brought her laptop. So Parks and Rec and wastewater both 28S. The civil engineer, our city engineer, is the only other 30S at this time. Safety Service Director and Economic Director right now are 26S and I'm a 25S. If that helps anybody. Okay, tonight we have Tom Burgasser with us to go over streets. But I will take any questions before Mr. Burgasser comes up here on the budget, if anybody has any that they'd like.
Streets will be in 1201, correct?
Right, 1201.
I don't have any questions first.
Okay, okay, well then I'm going to ask Tom to come on up.
Good evening, members of council. Mr. Gray, having been a graduate of Cincinnati Elder and having lost to the Massillon Tigers 5 times that they played, I can tell you that Cincinnati Anderson lost to them last week, not Cincinnati Elder. But we showed a son that Go Tigers. I think this is going to be a magical year. In talking about streets, I really want to talk first of all about team effort. I think it's appropriate, from the mayor and the safety director all the way to the engineering department, and then through the efforts of our street department employees. The information I have to share with you is a direct result of all of their efforts, all of the team. It really is a team. So I'd like to talk about snow and ice removal a little bit because it's on our minds right now. Salt spreaders are going on to the rest of the trucks today. We've been onloading and offloading gravel and other things, but that's really ceased by now. We're beginning to put the salt spreaders on. We've got 3,000 tons of salt on station. We've put out a request to remove basketball hoops, trailers from the roadways, cars with flat tires. And for the second year in a row, we're going to have a midnight shift, which will allow us, it was very successful last year. We probably hadn't done it in about 15 or 20 years. It allows us to get a jump on the bridges and the mains, and it allows for a speedier callback if the weather conditions change for the worst. Next thing I wanted to talk about is our bridges. Our bridges are kind of getting an infrastructure makeover. We took 40 plus trees that were 12 inches in diameter at minimum and 15 feet in length from under the Lincoln Way Bridge, abutting on the bridge on the Tuscarawas River. The Tremont Bridge had nearly 20 of those. Finnefrock Bridge is coming up next, and we don't know yet what that's got for us. Our under drains and catch basins are being opened. The ruts from where the water ran unchecked through the bridges for decades will be filled in shortly. And so we're excited about that. Our paving mission, we had a light winter last year, so that allowed us to do several small paving projects. We don't have milling equipment. We don't have the advanced methodology that some of the big contractors have. What we got is a group of guys that know how to use a 40-year-old paver, and they do it pretty well. So we completed 42 paving projects. We used nearly 1,200 tons of asphalt at a cost of $105,160. We performed a number of paved patches. And what a paved patch does is it buys time until the road can be milled, engineered, the catch basins and drainage systems can be put in, and then the final layers of asphalt, the entire solution is achieved. We did the State Route 21 expansion joint project. We milled 114 of those. We had two bids, one for $127,000, one for $10,000. We chose the $10,000 one because we wanted to make sure that things were safe. Again, it's not a sheet of glass, but it is much more safer than it was. Last thing I really wanted to talk about that we've been doing, 18 months ago somebody hit an attenuator. An attenuator is that device at the end of the jersey barriers that allows for a cushion if cars hit it. And obviously it's part of the guardrail system. So somebody hit that and I got a quote. It was like $9,000, and I looked across the road and I saw that there was a guardrail that was smashed, and I didn't know for how long that had been smashed or why it was smashed. So I contacted the law department to see if I could send a bill to the vehicle driver's insurance company, and they told me yes. So as of today, all of our guardrails are listed and inspected quarterly. There's 180 sections of guardrail in the city. We've established a maintenance and repair program. To date, we've spent $100,300 on guardrails, and we've recovered about $80,000 from insurance. We're going to seek reimbursement for any damages caused to poles, lights, guardrails, because our residents shouldn't have to bear those costs. So we have about 6 guardrail projects for repair currently underway. They'll be repaired the last week of December. Southway fence is backed up probably about 3 or 4 months, so they're going to get to them by the end of the year, and we'll finish up that project. We still have about 12 pieces of guardrail to repair, but I think we're getting things done. We've got that. A lot of the guardrail repairs that we're doing now, we can't recover costs because we don't know who did them. So folks are working pretty hard. And so, any of you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Joe?
I'm just looking at the 2024 budget and comparing it to the 2023 current year spend. And I noticed under services and contracts, we spent over $167,000 in 2023, and we only have budgeted $30,000. In 2023, we budgeted $130,000. So comparing what we budgeted in 2023 to 2024, we're about $100,000 under. Is there a reason for that discrepancy?
So that's based on line striping, and every other year line striping is done, and so there's $100,000 that's set aside in the budget for line striping. And I think we've changed that, so that doesn't happen next year. It just was one of those things where we share budgets with engineering in certain places. So we tried to correct that for the 2024
I
budget.
just didn't want us to be under budget
No, we're good.
expenses. All right.
I'll point out for council that if you look at the statement markings, that has 100,000 where the previous year was 0. So it backs up when it's the first year.
It was confusing for me at first.
Any other questions for Mr. Berger this evening?
Thank you all very much.
All right. I don't have any other questions. I will say that in general for the administration, for next work session, I guess, can we get just an update of projects we might be looking at, for projects related to streets. I know usually you guys are starting to whittle that down at this time of year, and that's where we got budget from. So just in 2 weeks, we can give us an update on that.
Current project you're talking about?
Well, because we're appropriating $1.6 million for projects, so is that what projects would those be, or that are we targeting? All right. The next piece is the transfer of $75,000 from the marketplace. This is old business TIP to cover them to assist the developer in the mast arm that we discussed during streets and highways. Does anybody have questions about that? I know I showed some reservations, and I still don't really like it a whole lot, to be honest with you. But this council will be discussing other TIP options. And while I won't speak to those other TIPs for that part of Lincoln Way, that might be a remedy. So I guess for right now, I'll turn it over to either Lombardi or Gray, whichever one of you guys want to take it over, to talk about the old business of what I think is at 6 or 7 TIPs of those businesses on Lincoln Way East.
So we had, and I don't have them on my phone, so I don't have them in front of me.
I think it's Chick-fil-A, Panda Express, Starbucks.
All these get-go.
All these get-go.
Except
Okay.
Is everybody familiar with the TIFs? Have you read them? Are there any questions about any of them?
Also, Consumer National Bank.
I can see you. Now, if there's no question, we'll just move on.
And I stated at a previous council meeting, I'll be abstaining from discussion and conversation regarding those pieces. And I guess, Mr. Lombardi, I'll just turn it over to you at that point. So, President, council, those TIFs will go to Mr. Lombardi for this conversation and discussion. But the marketplace TIF, I can still handle. And the reason that is that's an existing TIF. I'm not making a decision as to whether one should go into effect or not, because it already exists. Where these ones, a decision is being made. And because of my big time employment, I have to excuse myself from conversation and we have a few new pieces here tonight. Please prepare legislation to appropriate the unappropriated balance of the police pension fund, $1,244.49, and this is to pay police pensions through the end of the year. Anybody have any questions? Please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the fire pension fund, $63,576.31, pay fire pension through the end of the year. Just have to use Warren or Stephanie.
Okay. Good evening.
Yeah, I just was wondering, is there a factor that played into us being 63,000 short for the budgeted amount?
It all is tied to the retention bonus that the firemen all received.
Okay. So some of that retention bonus has to go into...
Yeah, like that we had to match the
Okay.
police and fire pension.
Anybody else have any questions? What about this one where we're doing the transferring? Is this essentially where we're taking the money from the disability pension and we're transferring it into this?
Yeah, the fire chief also has transfers going through within this year's budget from other lines in the fire department that he's moving into the transfer out in his general fund budget. Then that's getting, there's a piece of legislation that moves it to the 1210 fund, and then the piece to actually appropriate more in the 1210 in order for me to pay the pension. yeah, there's a few, just,
So these transfer outs over here are then finalized with this transfer.
the budget transfer kind of first in a way, that we normally do those last. There's a budget transfer where he is transferring into the disability and pension transfer out for $60,428. He's moving from several accounts in his budget. He has two, but one of them is just for pension.
So this last one, we're taking out gas and oil, 18,000, uniform allowance,
Correct.
10,000, travel seminar, 10,000, EMS billing overpayment, 5,000, salary fire, 24,428.50, living and disability pension. We do this, we sign off on it, and then we're going to transfer this into,
The 1210, correct, that's the legislative transfer, then moving it from the general fund into the 1210. And then we also just have to then appropriate into the 1210 enough for me to be able to pay the pension. Like to increase the appropriation.
which would have been this piece,
Yes,
the 63,000.
correct, yes, the 63. And then in the end, that zeroes out the account for me at the end of the year.
Makes sense.
Okay, good.
And then we have a reduction of, we're doing the budget legislation to reduce the servicing contracts in 1234, 5055, 2392, placing that into refunds income tax, $5,000. And then we have another one, reduces supply control postage to 1201, 455, 2410, and that's also going into refunds income tax. Any questions on either of those? All right, more transfers. We have another one on fire. Reduction of funeral expenses by $310, putting that in the hospital and I. Reduction of salary by $12,000, putting it in overtime. Reduction of supplies and materials, putting it into supplies and contracts. Services and contracts, sorry. Police department, we're going to have a reduction in the renovations to that building by $20,000, placing it into police lease purchase and equipment. Ms. Sylvester, did we just not get all the renovations we had hoped for this year?
Good evening, Council. Yes, that amount, there is an amount usually put into their budget for that. But as you know, we do have ARPA funds that are set aside to do a renovation there. And actually tomorrow we have a meeting with the design team. They've got some final drawings put together and so forth, and probably have to be done in phases. So you are correct, they just didn't use that. And actually where they're transferring it into the lease purchase equipment, as Chief St. Louis mentioned when he was here doing the budget, we did have a few accidents with our cruisers. All three of those accidents now have been no fault of the officers. When Chief St. Louis was here, there was an accident of a young officer, but after the sheriff's office did the reports, it was found at no fault because the person that he did hit said that they did hear the sirens, they did see the lights, so it is their obligation to get out of the way. One of the vehicles, not that particular one, but one of the vehicles, one of our detectives' vehicles, the insurance company of the at-fault person, they totaled that vehicle. So we are now having a hard time finding a good quality vehicle for the amount that they give us for that vehicle. So that's where we're at. So since we're not using that at this point, we're transferring that to be able to get a vehicle for a little bit more money than we can put this $20,000 towards that.
Thank you. Street Department, reduction of accumulated sick by $60,000, placing that in service and contracts. Legends, reduction in unemployment by 1,000, utilities by 4,000, gas and oil by 2,200, placing that in service and contracts. And engineering, reduction in travel seminar school by $1,916.07, placing that into service and contracts. All right, that is all I have. I do want to make a reminder, I can't remember if I said anything last week, but I want to make a reminder that with the change of council occurring at the end of this year, it is a new council effective January 1st. That means any legislation that is in front of this body will either have to be resolved or it'll be auto-terminated at the end of this year and you have to be reintroduced in January if continued conversation needs to occur. So I just want to remind anybody, in case they have anything out there that's going to be hanging out for a minute. Does anybody